Hell in microcosm. This is the high level. We're talking regiment v. regiment. Maneuver elements are the battalion. We're going to use this to fight a battle using Henry Hyde's Wargaming campaigns. But to do that, we need to take a look at how Henry suggests we dial in from this large scale, 1 inch equals 40 miles. We are going to want to build a battlefield that's probably like 40 miles by 40 miles. Well, wait a minute. 1 centimeter is 25 kilometers, maybe even 50 by 50 kilometers. So the question is going to be how big? And maybe not 50 by 50 because we are constrained by the size of our table. Since we're not using miniatures in this one, everything is going to be in paper. And wouldn't you know it, how convenient is this? It turns out that my camera set up here is perfectly suited to an 11 by 17, or alternatively, if you use the European units, that's 28 by, call it 43 centimeters, which at 1 centimeter to 2 kilometers gives us 56 by 80. All right, so there you go, about 60 by 80. That's a pretty good scale for the combat that we're looking at. The only thing we know for sure is that we have a junction, and I'm going to put that junction right here. So we have 2 rail lines that come in. One goes over here to the mines, and this is, of course, the MacGuffin over which our forces are fighting. We've got another rail line that goes off in this direction somewhere to the small river bridge town right there. Okay, it's unnamed. And then this one comes up to, what is this? Pylomopolis. That's what it was. I couldn't remember. And it looks like it kind of kicks off in this direction. So that's to Pylomopolis. All right. We're just going to call this to JB River. That's all I know to get started. So how are we going to fill in all of this turf? Well, we know that it's in the plains, but we're about 1.5 centimeters. Call it a half an inch. We're about 20 miles from the foothills, so there may be some hills along this area. In fact, that rail line may come along the hills before it goes up into the valley. That would be my guess. But I like to leave this bit of world creation to the hands of the dice. All right, I've shuffled my cards. I'll go ahead and cut them a little bit better. This is a little suspicious. All those face cards that were spades down here, I probably didn't shuffle very good. Now we're doing everything on this side of the junction. Of course, the railroad will run through here. I'm going to deal out 8 cards, but because we said these are mostly hills, instead of having aces represent a lake, I'm going to have aces and jacks, both equal hills. So we get another village up there, and another, what do we say, a hill. So we get a couple more little villages out here on the edges of the map. So here's a hill, and that's going to be a diamond-sized hill. So it is a militarily significantly sized hill. For the diamonds, I'm going to make those equal to 2 centimeters in diameter, roughly. And our queen of clubs will be a small village. And again, that will have 1 centimeter radius. And then up here we have the diamond, which will be a 2 centimeter village, like so. So a little mail stop there. And then the fairly substantial hill, and then this will be the start of that big line of hills. That hill overlooks, and that's going to be important for us. So I got to clean this up, and when we come back, we'll figure out how to deploy the defenses, and then we'll look at things as our attackers come in from this direction and treat this as a puzzle. If you had to defend this not knowing what the attacker is going to do, how would you deploy your troops? And then having done that, we'll say, okay, well now if I was the attacker and I've got some air recon, because it's modern, how would I deploy my attackers? Do I want to take this hill? Do I set my artillery up behind it? Do I set them up behind the lake? Do we use this as screening cover? So, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let me go ahead and clean up this art, and we'll be right back. After cleaning it up, our map looks a little something like this. I've had to make a few judgment calls and a few adjustments to add a few more points of interest and to link things together in a more sensical way. And I think the first thing to discuss is that the numbers were a little off size-wise, and the locations were a little off. I've kind of massaged them to give us some interesting things to look at. For example, let's go ahead and start over here and work our way left to right. The largest village, this was the Spade, should have been, as I said, we were going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4 centimeters. Well, 4 centimeters makes this village 8 kilometers across. That's over 5 miles. And if this is a village of only a few thousand people, that seemed a little excessive to me. So I said, you know, we're going to make our biggest feature 2 centimeters across. So each of these are roughly 2 centimeters across. The village, the woods, the hill, and this lake. And then because this lake over here, I believe this was a club, was close enough, I said, you know what, I'm going to start my clubs off at 1.5 centimeters. Now, I made the smallest size 1.5 centimeters because that's the size we decided on for the perimeter, and I've even sketched out the perimeter of a couple of battalions of the defenders over here, but we'll get to that. I said, okay, so if our smallest is 1.5, and then we'll go 2, 3, 4, because now we have a significant enough terrain feature to be worth putting on the map. Of course, with the village, with the rail line coming in from this direction, I said, yeah, we'll drop a village down there. And then I measured it, it's 50 kilometers to the junction. And I thought, well, the junction should at least have a depot. There should be a little office there. And that's about 17 kilometers from this small village over here. Again, 1.5 centimeters across. Makes it about 3 kilometers across. That's a nice small village, maybe 1,000 people. And, you know, it's about a half-hour drive to get up to the depot. So probably a mail swap, right? A little bit. And then I even dropped an improved road. So I think one of the things to be aware of is that these are not the only features within this area. These are only the militarily significant features. This road is fairly well traveled. It will be easy to travel, and you can maybe get a little bit of a speed bump. Of course, everybody's going to move a heck of a lot faster if they have access to trains and faster along this road. But everywhere else, it's kind of cross-country. We're going to move at the standard speed. Now, what else can we talk about? Well, you see that, as I mentioned, we had these lakes. And I was like, well, man, if I'm going to link these 2 lakes up, I might as well put an uncrossable river, or at least a river that's generally uncrossable. Here, this river comes tumbling down, and of course, the terrain is tilted. Hills over here, the draining river, the overall water flow is in this direction. And I maybe tweaked it just a little bit. Maybe north, if the rail line comes in from this direction, maybe north isn't due that way. I think maybe we need to adjust this, and maybe we put north like more in that direction, and we'll make it black so you can see. So that way, the fact that we've got a rail line coming in through the village, interestingly enough, that means that this will make a perfect jump-off point for our attackers when they try to take the junction back. That's the point of this battle. So that's kind of where we're at. For the record, 50 kilometers, and then it's a 17-kilometer drive, as we said, and then it's 5 kilometers from Hill 213 to the depot. That's really important. I should point out, I drew the whole map first before I measured any distances between these features. I didn't really want to worry about that. I just kind of clumped them up. And of course, these 2 lakes are far enough north, probably not going to have an effect. This hill here, probably not going to have an effect. For the record, the larger the hill, I said this is Hill 404, and you know, in fine military fashion, that's the height of the hill. So the crown of this hill is at 404 feet above the surrounding terrain. This one, of course, is 365, and this one is Hill 213. So I just picked numbers that kind of vaguely mean something. With all of that said, the question that we turn our brains to is, what are our defenders going to do to try to maintain possession of this junction? They have a couple of different things they need to think about. They have to try to defend, to prevent, and a big part of this is making sure that they cut the link of communications and shipment between Pylamopolis and the capital city through here. Now, granted, there's still a junction this way, a rail junction this way, but this will limit the ability of the Septemtrians to bring forces to bear from up north. They are going to have reinforcements coming up here, and they're all going to have to kind of converge in this little area anyway. So what that means for our scenario as we drill down is they have a couple of options. They could set up a defensive line here along Hill 404. And these two lakes and this bridge, which is the only place to cross the river for, well, I don't know. So I put a longer river down here, and as I said, that river's kind of draining in this direction. Everything kind of flows this way. So it all flows kind of that way. And at this point, the river widens out, it slows down, it's fordable, it becomes less of a problem. And as I said, there's probably little farmhouses and little bridges along whatever waterways there are. There's probably other buildings and structures out here, isolated farmsteads, not militarily significant. They're not even a speed bump for a battalion-sized force. They might slow down a platoon, but we're talking about whole battalions here, right? We need this 3 kilometers by 3 kilometer area because that's how much real estate the battalion takes up when it sets up a defensive perimeter. And in fact, we might even underguess that a little bit. With all that said, now let's zoom in and let's take a look at the defense. I've already set up the defender's position. And one of the key things to be aware of here is that you have 3 battalions in our regiment. Those are our maneuver elements, and you have 3 features. We, of course, are going to focus in on this depot. So the first feature is the depot itself. We've had a couple of days. Each of these battalions is going to start in prepared defenses. Why do I have a battalion here? Because this is the line of communication back home. This may ultimately wind up being, see, here we are. So they want to retreat back here, and that means heading off in, well, if we turn it this way, that means heading off in kind of this direction a little bit more. But that means our 1st Battalion up here at the depot, they're dug in. They've got all 15 strength points, as we talked about, and they are on prepared defense. Okay. If they move out of that, if they try to travel, they're going to have to travel along here, and they may even be able to travel under the watchful guns of these guys on the hill. Now, why are these guys on the hill? It's a defensible feature. We may give them some credit for that. But and then again, in the city, this is probably a defensible feature as well. This is going to be an urban fight if you try to assault them. So there are 2 other things that we need to be aware of. This particular regiment is backed up by a company of medium armor. Where do you put the medium armor? And here's where those meaningful decisions come into play. I have put the medium armor behind Hill 213. In any given turn, and I made some notes here because I wanted to make sure I got this right. When you are committed to travel, your infantry move 1.5 centimeters per half hour. We're going to go 30-minute turns. Your beast cavalry, they may show up before this battle's over. They move 3 centimeters per half hour, and the vehicles move at 8 centimeters per half hour. That 8 centimeters, by the way, is 16 centimeters per half hour or 32 kilometers per hour. You'll have to run the numbers on infantry and beast. Unfortunately, Jim didn't do that for us. He only gave us the vehicles, and part of the justification there is that's the average speed. I know that probably seems pretty slow to you, but this is the average speed along a road when you're trying to keep everybody organized. It is an average speed. It doesn't take into effect I should say it does take into account the fact that this road here that I've drawn as a straight line might meander back and forth a little bit. So bear that in mind. Those are our speeds. Now, if you are prepared for battle, then you are going to move your foot infantry will move at 3 kilometers. 1.5 centimeters per half hour. They'll move at 6K per hour. That's pretty fast. This might be a little excessive. Maybe we're assuming that they have some kind of transports with them, not necessarily armored fighting vehicles, but some kind of vehicles. And that speed, again, assumes that they're preparing to assault or preparing to attack. The beast cavalry here will only move forward. They're probing. They're not, racing across the field. They're moving, kind of leapfrogging each other, moving a little more cautiously, looking to establish contact. So they're only moving at 2 centimeters. And likewise, the vehicles, this is our tanks, they're only going to move at 2 centimeters per half hour. So why do we put them here? Well, because this gives us the flexibility we don't know what the enemy is going to do. The enemy may wind up throwing their full might over here at this town, and we need to scramble our defensive force here on Hill 213 to launch a counterattack. And the tanks are going to come around here, and they'll be able to support that counterattack. Now, the tanks don't attack on their own. They will strengthen one of these units, and they're better at strengthening units on the attack than on the defense. So we're going to have some time as the enemy approaches to make some adjustments to where these tanks are located. Likewise, we have a company of mortars, a company of artillery. In our army list, we said that each of these regiments has, in addition to their every three companies is a regiment of leg infantry. Now, the gendarmes for the defenders are off here trying to subdue the mining town, which is not going to be easy. Bunch of hooligans out there. They do have support vehicles. Those support vehicles are largely for logistics. They also have a company of tube artillery. And I thought, how are we going to model that tube artillery? So I thought, well, is that howitzers? Well, not really, because those are vehicles. Is that light mortars? I said, maybe there are a couple of howitzers, one or two, but mostly, and I'm assuming that each of these battalions has a little bit of, the leadership has provided some mortars to each of them. But those are going to be your smaller 80 millimeter mortars. Those are going to be for the up front and close fighting. These are 120 millimeter. This is a company of the big boomy boys, and they're going to be able to, so here's the question, what's the range of those going to be? The effective range is going to be 10,000 meters, or 5 centimeters, which means if we put those mortars here, then they're going to be able to defend the village, and they're going to be able to lend their fire support to defending the hill, but they're out of position for the depot. And that's why we put the medium armor up here, because as the 1st Battalion comes under attack, the medium armor can swing around, and of course it's going to take them, we'll see that heavy attack coming, and so that first turn, oh look, they can get right up to the perimeter in 30 minutes, and then on the next turn, they're going to be able to lend their weight to that prepared defense as kind of a counterattack. Or if the defense holds and we decide to shift to make the attempt to shift to a hasty attack, then we've got the tanks backing us up. And of course, if things go really poorly and these guys are thrown out of the depot and they need to switch to hasty attack to try to retake it, they'll have the armor backing them up. So this is what our battle plan looks like, and I really enjoyed sitting down and treating this as a puzzle to be solved. This set of rules, Hell in Microcosm, by Jim Webster, really helps you think like a regimental commander. Where do I want to set my units up so that they can lend the most effect? Now, if I brought these mortars up to here, they would be within range of supporting the depot. However, then they're kind of splitting the difference between these two units, and they're vulnerable. By bringing them back a couple of kilometers and setting them up here, right? And any kind of leg infantry that assault this, we're going to be able to see them coming. Like there's 3 centimeters right there. They're going to get to here. We're going to have a full turn to break down our stuff and get back around the kind of loose perimeter provided by these guys over here. So with that in mind, now we turn our attention to the other guys. And the other guys, of course, are taking the rail. That gets them across the map in fairly short order. Using Henry Hyde's movement speeds, the rail lines it's effectively to get from here to here, and it's just on the map, right? So you can just barely see that rectangle I drew. You can get, that's 1 day's travel for the trains. By rail, you can move 100 miles. Well, 100 miles is 2.5 inches, and there you go. So we leave the center of town, 2.5 gets you to there. Then the next day they arrive. So as we said, they begin mobilizing on the 7th. I think it was the 7th. I can't remember the exact days. They, of course, are back. Ooh, the Hook Regiment here is backed up by heavy tanks. We got to remember that. So we come through here. They're going to wind up here at the end of the first day, and then day 2, they're going to arrive in our little village, and they're going to be able to deploy. And then we have to decide, well, how are we going to get them over to here? We could, of course, if we assume perfect knowledge, and we could say, well, why don't we go ahead and get them to right here, and they can offload on the trains right here over the course of a day. The problem with that is that that leaves them vulnerable to a counterattack. These guys are not simply going to sit. We assume that they've got, now remember we talked about air power already. The air power is largely a wash, but it does allow for, I guess we could call it far better reconnaissance than you would get in the black powder era. In fact, specifically, there are probably recon units that are out here patrolling and looking for the enemy. They might have a watchtower up on Hill 365, and when you see that train coming, they'll radio back and then scramble back to get, even if it's just like a squad of guys, of recon guys, they'll swing north and come back around. So I think, but we don't need to detail all of that. All we need to understand is that where exactly are these guys going to deploy? And the other reason that becomes significant is if on day 2 they deploy in the village and then they march along the rail line, then how many turns is it going to take? Now remember, we said they were going to move at 3 centimeters per hour. So if we give them an 8-hour day, that will allow them to march 24. Oh man, look at that. After 10 hours, well, this is, I'm sorry. If they're marching at 3 kilometers, what did we say? It was going to be 3 if they're in travel mode. Let me check and see how we did this on our map, huh? And given the fact that we're bringing heavy tanks to bear, I think that day is just fine. So the infantry can travel. On travel, they can move 3 centimeters or 6 kilometers per hour. So if we divide, so this right here, 24, that is a full day's hike. And what that tells me is we are going to be able to get them over this bridge and get them to somewhere around here where they're going to have to bivouac. And we want them to set up, and their artillery are also going to have a range of about 5 centimeters. So they're going to want to set up right about here so that they actually can lend their weight of support. In fact, if they wanted to lend their weight of support to either of these guys, they're probably going to have to come off over to this location. So their artillery is going to want to set up over here. And as they're setting up, there's a chance that these boys come off the hill and hit them before they're set up for their prepared attack. I'm not quite sure that's how it works. But essentially what this means is, now that we've looked at this small-scale situation, the good news is the attackers, the Septemtrians, are going to have the ability to scout this out and put together a plan of attack. Even if they can't use the bonuses that you get for a hasty attack, they're going to be able to pick and choose who they want to fight. And we're going to have to decide, what do they want to do? Do they want to move south and try to cut off the retreat? Do they want to cut off the lines of communication and supply? Or do they want to just go ahead and bust wide open the depot? So these are strategic situations that are going to be handed down to the regimental commander. And what that's going to come down to is, when does this extra regiment become available? Not until the 24th. Well, we're only somewhere around the 12th to 14th, whereas this comes available on the 12th. There's a 12-day difference. So this is where we need to step back and take a look at the overall. This is why, if you want to run a decent campaign, strict time records must be kept. I'm going to go back to my yellow pad, and one of these days I'll run a campaign where I keep much better track of this. The silver mines were secured on the Osterregnum crossed the frontier. They arrived at the railhead on the 7th. There you go. And we decided that the regnants started on the 5th. The first air combat will occur on the 12th, but the Septemtrians, they begin their mobilization on the 7th. That's the day after the Osterregnum forces cross the frontier. So they begin on the 7th. Everybody musters. On the 8th, they load up. On the 9th, they take the train down to here. On the 10th, they unload in this sleepy little village. And then on the 11th, they head out. So on the 11th, they're going to bivouac, and their attack is going to occur on the 12th. That's important because that means our battle here occurs on the same day that the silver mines are pacified. But what are we going to call this? We're going to call this the Battle of Hill 213. Is going to occur on the 12th, and that becomes significant from a strategic point of view because it means that this regiment down here, and these beast cavalry that are ready to go on the 12th, they have a unit of light tanks that can keep up with the beasts. They're going to have to, they move out on the 12th, so let's see, they're available on the 12th, so that'll be like a day, and then 2, and then 3, so they're not going to be able to reach here until the 15th. So really, these guys have the objective of, can we hold out for 3 full days? And that's what we have to decide in our video. Okay, so how are we going to launch our attack? And again, when you are deployed in prepared defense, you have this size. But when you are on the attack, when you are simply moving, you're going to have a different size territory that your battalion covers. Per the rules, our ground scale. Oh, okay, so for the rules, remember, 1 centimeter is 100 meters. And your typical battalion says a piece of card 5 centimeters. So we're really looking at about 500 meters across. And again, up here it says, not there, where is it? Changing orders. Here we go. In travel mode, a company is a single line of vehicles 4 centimeters long. Well, that's not true for us. We have to do a little bit of conversions, and that's okay. 1 battalion has a minimum frontage of, 2 companies abreast. That's 1 kilometer, which is a half a centimeter for our map. So you see how big our defenders are? Our attackers are going to be, if we were using counters, they would only be this big, and we'll make it about a square. So this is what your attacker looks like. Well, why is your attacker so much smaller than your defender? Because your defender is strung out along this whole area, and your defender has rear lines of communication and is dug in and is covering a wide territory. All right, so I guess really what it boils down to is, what are our attackers going to do? How are they going to try to crack this attack? And of course, they want to attack at least one of these with a 2-to-1 ratio. And the question is going to be, our leader, the vice president of the Defense Directorate, Mr. Tobor, is intelligence 42. We grade on a curve. Compared to other generals of his caliber, he's in the 42nd percentile. So not a military genius, but his courage is 56. Not very charismatic, but he is strong as a boss. And he has orders to seize the depot and hold this ground. So he wants to do 2 things. He wants to grab the hill, and that's going to be the linchpin for his defense for any potential counterattack. But he, first of all, really wants to break the depot so that when we get reinforcements in, we can unload them here instead of 50 kilometers back that way. 30 miles is way too far. So what we're going to do is we are going to hit this with 2 battalions. So the 1st and 2nd are going to come in, and we're going to we're going to try to take the hill as well. So why don't we send our 3rd battalion in this way? But see, this is where the logistics of a battle like this get complicated, because you can stiffen a battalion with another battalion, and essentially if that 1st battalion gets thrown back from the walls, then it trades places with the battalion behind. So that's how this fight is going to go. The 1st and the 2nd, I need to check the rules and figure out whether they're going to be in hasty attack or prepared attack. I believe they're going to be in hasty attack. Then we're going to send our heavy armor in with this 3rd battalion. And we'll designate, now we have to choose who are the artillery going to support. And let me just write here that this battle is going to take place on July 12th. At least it's going to start there. And of course, our troops are really going to start over here, just back off a little bit. So it's going to take a couple of moves to get into position. And so we're going to leave the enemy, we're thinking as the Septembrians now, we're going to leave them an open route of attack. Yeah, you guys go ahead and fall back. Because if we take this hill, we may dispatch in fact, we also have the ability to stiffen with our gendarmes, right? I don't think so though. I think maybe what we do is we leave them here to defend this point, and we can race them up if we have to. So I'm not going to worry about those guys, but I do have to worry about this artillery. Is the artillery going to support this main attack or the attack on the hill? And I think we designate the artillery to attack support here. Because if we can bust that hill up and then win this, the only way that this battalion is going to be able to retreat is along the railhead. That's going to be their fastest route of retreat. And they're going to race back to the mines, and that may make it harder to retake the mines, but if we can camp out on Hill 213 and brace with both of these remaining battalions, now we're on defense as Septemtrians for when the inevitable counterattack comes. Now, these guys might not know when it's coming, but they know it will. You and I know that it's going to arrive sometime on the 15th or 16th, so they got to be ready for that. In fact, this battalion may be able to come to the aid of the regiment coming up from down there. So we have a really interesting strategic and tactical situation going on here. I would like to run this battle today, but I want to read through the rules one more time, just make sure I haven't missed anything. And I'm going to reset these chits, these counters. I'm going to pull them back over here for where they start the day. This is their bivouac. This is their rally point. This is where they will fall back to if they are defeated. In fact, we'll kind of put that like right here, I think. This is their fallback. There's probably a military term that you guys are going to be pulling your hair out and hoping I use that next time. But I'm very eager to find out how this battle plays out. And we're going to take a look at how Hell in Microcosm works. I'm doing it really basic this time, I admit. No air power? What are you doing, man? Don't you want to do that fun little rock, paper, scissors mini game that Jim Webster presents with air power? We'll do that next time. Okay? But that's a layer of complexity that I'm not quite prepared for. In fact, this whole modern era thing, once you get past horse, musket, and guns, this stuff gets complicated. I'm really impressed with you modern day wargamers that can manage to juggle all of this information. You guys are amazing. I'm glad to have you along for the ride. I hope you'll stick around for the next episode. Until then, I'm praying for you.